Paul Hudrick is here to kind of maybe give us some information. The Sixers are kind of coy when it comes to that kind of stuff, but we'll figure out. They had said the other day that Ben Simmons was going to be out. He has been now upgraded to questionable. I don't know how you go from out to questionable, but the Sixers have figured out a way to do that. Paul Hudrick's here to talk more about that. The weekend was ugly. That game in Milwaukee, I know they were very shorthanded, but whoo, that was an ugly one. Thankfully, that's behind them. We've all talked about the schedule. I think they have the easiest remaining schedule in the league. Is that accurate, Paul Hudrick?
At least in the Eastern Conference, I believe. But it's a lot of very, very winnable games over the last 12.
Does it matter if they're winnable games if you're playing without Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Danny Green, and whoever else was on that CVS receipt?
Well, against the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are going to be without their best player in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and their second best player in Lou Dort, you might not need those guys. You probably can win this game without that CVS receipt of guys. You probably could still beat this Thunder team because they are just really young, really inexperienced. I mean, they are clear. We all witnessed this years ago with the Sixers. That is what the Thunder are doing right now. Make no mistake about it. This is a tank. This is the process happening in Oklahoma City. And they're being smart about, their best player, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. No reason to put him out there in situations where he could get hurt. Same with Lou Dort. Those are their centerpieces right now. Those are their two guys that they really like. They have a lot of upside, that are good NBA players right now. Everybody else in that lineup is just a lot of hopeful potential upside guys. So if like one of Joel, Ben, or Tobias plays, this should be a 30-point win because that's how bad the Thunder are right now and how bad they are off with injuries. For me, I would really like to see Ben Simmons play because I think it would be a really good kind of get-back game for him where he could, get back into the flow of it and potentially dominate with so many guys out and with him kind of being the focal point.
Yeah, Embiid has a shoulder problem. Is this just a precautionary thing, or is there he's questionable?
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's precautionary. The fact that he's been questionable the last two games and not flat out is probably a good sign. I have a feeling that, first of all, Doc he didn't say for sure, but he seemed pretty confident that if that were a playoff game on Saturday, Joel Embiid would have been able to play. He said he knows Ben Simmons would not have been able to, so that stomach bug was pretty darn real, apparently. But wow. Yeah, in regards to Joel Embiid, it seems like it's not serious, and it's more and we saw it with Tobias Harris. Like, they just want to make sure these guys are 100% before putting them in. It's a tough balance between that and that number one seed. But again, like we talked about before, Mike, that number one seed means nothing if those guys aren't healthy.
Yeah, no, I mean, if they're not playing, you got no shot, obviously. Harris, knee recovery, this is questionable. I'm imagining this is going to be the rest of the year from him. What about Green with the hip situation?
So that's actually been something he's been dealing with all season. Doc said that. I can't remember the game he missed when he finally missed the game for the first time all season. That is, and Doc had mentioned, that's something that's been lingering all season. Probably something that's not going to be 100% at all through the rest. He's just going to have to kind of play through it. That leads me to believe that maybe there might be a surgical procedure in his future this offseason. But, he's the kind of guy, he's a veteran guy. He's been around the block. He knows his body, and he probably knows he's going to try to play through it. And they need him because he's been really, especially in the second half of the season, he has been excellent. He's been so big for them on the court, off the court. He's been, I think that's like immeasurable how big he's been for them, that, his presence, his leadership, the championship experience, most notably. But yeah, I mean, that's, like I said, Doc had mentioned, that's something that's going to linger with him all season. So they're just going to have to monitor it and kind of, and nurse it as best they can.
Yeah. And Korkmaz has an ankle problem, and those things are always tricky. You never know there. So that's really your group. Embiid, Green, Harris, Reed, who has health and safety, and Simmons. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys, all questionable for the game tonight. You would imagine some of them play, maybe some of them don't. That being said, did you take away anything from the two Milwaukee games? You get anything from that?
Let's see. A couple things. I mean, listen, I'm kind of digging and searching at this point, but I'll say to start off, I think all 4 games that they lost proved to you how important Ben Simmons is on defensively alone, just how important he is, especially guarding the 3-point line, because that's something that he does so well. Mike, I don't think it's crazy to say that all 4 of those games might have ended differently had Ben Simmons been playing in all 4 of them, especially the Golden State and the Phoenix games. Being able to throw him on Curry, being able to throw him on Booker, although Matisse Thybulle obviously did a masterful job, but just having Ben Simmons in the lineup for those games, I think would have made a world of difference and might have been the difference between a win and a loss. So I think that's a big thing in general, just how big important he is defensively. And then, it's a shame because they've lost every game that George Hill has played. But I think what you've seen out of George Hill, you're kind of seeing the bits and pieces of what he can add. Doc had mentioned, and I tend to agree that the biggest disappointment of this, other than the obvious of losing games, is that George Hill needs to assimilate. He needs to get acclimated with these other guys, and they've all been in and out of the lineup, so he hasn't been able to. So, I really want to see what George Hill is going to look like with Ben Simmons. With prolonged stints with Joel Embiid, what he's going to look like in a bench unit, because we haven't seen that yet because it's been all kind of tangled up. And then the other thing I would just add is don't forget about Tyrese Maxey, man. He's looked really good. Oh, and that's, again, over the last 4 games. He's gotten an opportunity, and he's really taken advantage of it. He's looked really good. What he offers, what he brings to the table with that speed and with his ability to get to the rim is just something they don't have. Now, he's a 20-year-old rookie, so you can't expect him to carry like a big load or have a big role. But I'm just saying, at some point, Doc Rivers even said it, he's going to win them a game in the regular season or the playoffs, and I don't think that's crazy. I think at some point I could see them going to him just to kind of give him that little spark and that energy and that speed, getting downhill and getting to the basket.
Yeah, I don't know if Doc has commented on this because the game on Sunday or Saturday was so brutal. I mean, they got beat by, 40? But how hard is it to try to set your playoff rotations over these last 10 games when there's nobody there?
Yeah, it's impossible, really. Right now and I think there are still things that need to be learned. Shake Milton has been up and down. I thought he's pretty good in both Milwaukee games. I mean, the Saturday game was just you can't really evaluate anybody really, but I thought he was decent considering what they were trying to ask him to do. But I thought the first Milwaukee game was very good, bounced back after a couple rough games. Furkan Korkmaz was looking really good and looking like he was going to make Doc have to, make some tough decisions. Now he's hurt. Thybulle, I think, has kind of been the guy who has really solidified himself. I don't know how you cannot play him in the playoffs because he's just been so good defensively, like game-changing on defense. And then, like I mentioned, Maxey, that he's given Doc Rivers something to think about. And then another concern, Mike, and actually this kind of goes back to your last question as well, is Dwight Howard. What happens if they play Milwaukee and you have to go with they go with Bobby Portis? You can't. I don't think you can put Dwight Howard out there. That matchup was disastrous in those 2 games.
Yeah.
So I think there are just, to your point, so many questions that need to be answered, and they only got these last few games to do it.
Yeah, and they went with Scott for 15 minutes, and they went with Tolliver for 21, and Tolliver it was a -18, didn't take a shot. I think he took 1 shot, but nothing from 3. So it wasn't like he said, hey, give me the shot. Because you're mentioning, I agree with you. That's a good point on Howard. I would guess you would go small with a guy like Scott or Tolliver, and neither one of them really did
I would
much.
go Ben Simmons. I would go Ben Simmons at the 5, and then I would just make myself a really super switchable team, and surround him with guards and shooters. That's what I would do. I don't know if that's what Doc Rivers is going to do, but I don't think you can play. Right now, what we've seen from Mike Scott, I do not think you can put him in a playoff rotation. He just hasn't been the same guy he was 2 years ago. I don't know if it's his knees. I don't know what it is, but I don't think you can go to him in a playoff series. And Tolliver, as you mentioned, he's done nothing to really I thought his debut was solid, but he's done nothing to separate himself or stand out where I think, okay, this guy deserves minutes. Granted, he's in a tough situation on, his second 10-day, and that's not, it's a lot of pressure and it's not an easy thing to do. But to me, the move would 100% be Ben Simmons, because I just think you have so many guards now that deserve minutes that I don't think putting Mike Scott in just because he's 6'8" makes sense.
Yeah, I thought Rajon Tucker was the best player in the last 6 minutes of that game. But George Hill thing you brought up, I guess it's frustrating because they've now got him, but aren't getting to see him in the role they envision him at all. Right? If you're watching him and saying, I thought this guy Hill was supposed to help him, this isn't the way that they wanted to use him.
No, not at all. I mean, they had to use him in the starting lineup against Milwaukee. They did not bring him in to change that starting lineup. They brought him in to be a bench guard, to potentially close games for sure at times, and just kind of help with that second unit. It goes back to that Golden State game. I actually asked Doc because they went four guards at certain points. I mean, if you want to call Matisse Thybulle, whatever, guard, wing, but they basically went four guards and Dwight Howard at the five, or sometimes they did it with Joel Embiid as well. And I was curious, was that just a product of Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris being out, or is that something he likes? And he said with George Hill, that's a look he really likes. And that goes back to what I said before about just four of your best bench players are probably guards or perimeter players at this point. So instead of kind of shoehorning Mike Scott into that four, go small and play your best players. And I think that gives you the better chance to win. So, I think with George Hill, I think that's what it does. I just think it makes that, it makes the bench unit better. If Doc wants to go with some of those all backups, I really hope he doesn't in the playoffs. I think he's a much better option to play with Dwight Howard than Ben Simmons for sure. I don't think those two should play a single minute together once the playoffs start. And then again, as I mentioned before too, with the closing of games, you see sometimes with Seth Curry, I think Seth Curry can help them. I think he can get hot and his shooting can help, but I think closing games that are physical and really defensive, I don't know that I want Seth Curry out there. I think I'd prefer to have George Hill.
Yeah, I know that we've talked a little bit about that, starting games with Curry, ending games with Hill. Curry, helping shoot you to a lead, Hill being out there to try to hold the lead defensively. That's something that I would like to see if they go down that road. By the way, for those of you out there who said the Sixers had nobody playing this weekend, I'm not watching. They've lost 4 in a row. They went from first place to second. They're now a game and a half behind Brooklyn, and Milwaukee lost yesterday. They were on a back-to-back. So for the guy who texted me the other day and said the back-to-back doesn't matter, Milwaukee looked great for 2 games, played it back-to-back. I think they played Atlanta, who's been playing very well, by the way, and Milwaukee loses yesterday. So they're 3.5 out of the top.
I think Trae Young was out, though. I mean, that's add that to that.
Add that to that. And that Hawks team, I'll tell you what, if we had this conversation a month ago, 4, 5, 6, okay. 4, 5, 6 looks interesting. Well, Miami currently is in that, the play-in tournament. But 4, 5, 6, and 7 all have a story to tell all of a sudden.
Yeah, the Knicks. I mean, look how well the Knicks are playing.
9 in a row.
They're the hottest team in the NBA right now. I think I for sure thought Miami had a run on them. And now I'm not so sure they do. They don't look like the same team. And it's funny that they traded Kelly Olynyk and they got Bjelica, and Olynyk looks better in Houston than Bjelica looks in Miami.
Well, how about this though, Paul?
That's kind of coming back to bite them a little bit.
The play-in
and then
teams,
you mentioned the Hawks playing so much better basketball. It's that 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, extremely, extremely interesting right now.
Well, even further, New York's won 9 in a row. Atlanta's won 7 of 10. Boston's won 7 of 10. Charlotte's won 2 straight. Pacers have won 3 in a row. And Washington has won 8 straight games.
Yeah.
So the whole bottom half of the East is playing some of their best. And the top part has been kind of stumbling along with Brooklyn, Philly, and Milwaukee.
Right. I think some of that, too. I mean, I don't want to take I don't want to take credit away from any of those teams because they've all been playing really good basketball. But I mean, part of that is a lot of the upper echelon teams are giving guys breaks. They are kind of resting guys as the stretch goes down. So you're seeing kind of those middle teams and bottom tier teams kind of rising because of that, because guys are giving guys nights, teams are giving guys nights off. So I think that's a factor as well.
Definitely.
I will say, I still think that it's the top 3 teams in the East are the teams. They are the teams to beat. New York Knicks are playing great basketball, and Thibodeau has done an unbelievable job. Julius Randle looks like a star right now. I mean, he's been incredible. But I will say that I think in a playoff series, I don't think the Knicks stand a chance against any of those top 3 teams. It's no disrespect to the Knicks. It's just that they don't have, they don't have the horses and they don't have the guys with that experience. I don't think that's something that you can really it's a factor. It's something that is measurable. And that's honestly why the biggest thing I might be scared of with the Milwaukee Bucks is that they seem to be of the Nets, the Sixers, and the Bucks, of that trio, they seem to be the most cohesive.
Yeah.
And they're playing better basketball. Yeah, they lost last night, but they are playing better basketball. They have guys with playoff experience. So when I'm looking at the three teams, that's probably the biggest factor, the biggest advantage that Milwaukee might have going into the playoffs.
Real quick, what is the play-in tournament setup? How was it? Best of three? How does that go?
I believe it's best of, well, I could be mistaken, but I believe the teams that are in already only have to win one game, and then the teams that are out have to win two.
Right.
I think that's the correct
what they
way,
did last
but
year.
I could be mistaken.
Well, that's what they did last year. The team that was out of the playoffs, they had to beat you twice, and so they're keeping that same format. But it's a little different because last year they didn't do it where the 7, 8, and 9 like this. If you were in, it wasn't. It was if you were within 4 games of the 8 seed, right? They changed that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be, it's so funny because when the Warriors were here and they asked Steve Kerr about it, because that's where the Warriors I think are like 10th or 9th right now, and he said and he literally said now that we're 9th or 10th, I think the play-in is great. If we were 7 or 8, I would hate it.
They're 10 right now.
That's the reality.
They're 10 right now, and New Orleans is 5 back of them. So I mean, unless the NBA really wants Zion and goes to 12 teams in this thing, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make 12 teams get into the play-in. I could see that happen. No, but that's going to be it. The New Orleans, Golden State's going to be in the mix because they're 5 games up. There's only like 10 games left, right?
Right.
So
yeah, I would think they have to be in that mix for that potential play-in. And I'm curious too, Mike. Like, how is it gonna how it's going to affect teams kind of going into that first? I mean, being realistic, the 7 and 8 seeds in either conference really don't have a chance. But I'm curious to see what it kind of does. Like, is that team going to be? We saw like last year, Portland having to play, and then they beat the Lakers in Game 1 because they were kind of already in that playoff mode, right? So I'm just curious if there's any carryover like there was with that last year. And or will it drain a team if they have to play multiple games? Will that be something that hurts a team that's the 8 seed or 7 seed having to go against a 1 or a 2? So it definitely adds a little intrigue. I don't know if I love it or hate it. I mean, I guess more basketball I like, so I'm not going to complain too much.
All right, so Josh, just the way it works is the 7 plays the 8th for the 7 seed, which doesn't seem fair. I've already been the 7 seed all year.
Right.
The loser of that game plays the winner of the 9 versus the 10 to be the 8 seed.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't like that. If I'm the 7 seed, I already earned the 7 seed. Why am I playing the 8 seed to be the 7 seed? I've already earned that seed.
It's very NCAA tournament-ish.
Yeah, All right. Paul Hudrick is back on Wednesday. The Sixers take on Oklahoma City, Wednesday Atlanta, Friday Atlanta, and then Sunday, Monday, Spurs, Bulls. And, the schedule, as you mentioned, lightens up a little bit down the stretch. At Paul Hudrick on Twitter to see who is in and who is out of the lineup tonight. All right, Paul, we'll talk to you Wednesday, man.
All right, Mike. Sounds good, man.
He, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Paul Hudrick, our Sixers insider for 97.3 ESPN.com.